Friends, I am so grateful that you are here for this special, special evening where we welcome Haleh Liza Gafori. And I am Margaret Somerville, the leader of Alignment. And you are here because you either love Rumi or you love Haleh Gafori, or you have already fallen in love with the book Gold, or you are about to fall in love with the book Gold. And I was just, as I was coming on camera here and holding my book, I was realizing this is how you know when you really love a book, right? You're holding it like this and it's already falling open. These are treasures in here. And I am delighted to welcome you, Haleh, to share with us your beautiful work of translating. So thank you. Welcome tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Margaret. I'm very happy to be with you all today in this evening that we're, on these screens, but we're still all here and that's great. And I will start, I'm going to start with the first poem. He says, آب حیات عشق را در رگ ما روان نکن. Let love, the water of life, flow through our veins. Let a love-drunk mirror steeped in the wine of dawn translate night. You who pour the wine, put the cup of oneness in my hand and let me drink from it until I can't imagine separation. Love, you are the archer, my mind is your prey. Carry my heart and make my existence your bullseye. Love, you are the archer, my mind is your prey. Carry my heart and make my existence your bullseye. In the first line of that poem, when he says, let love, the water of life, Ab Hayat means water of life. And it's an incarnation of love, we could say. It's one of the ways that the Sufi mystics describe love. It's this Ab Hayat is also a gushing fountain that is emerging from the soul. So in one of the stories, Khazr, of the prophet who's dressed in green, who's green everywhere he sits, green grows. He goes into the land of darkness, through the land of darkness, and discovers this gushing spring, Ab Hayat. And this is considered the life force. So in land of darkness, it doesn't mean darkness in a negative way. In this case, this is the sort of emptiness, the meditative emptiness that the mystics love to speak of. In this emptiness, right, that we reach a silence, a kind of space beyond narratives, beyond the chatter of the mind and all this stuff, this emptiness that then can fill with spirit, with soul, with the divine. This is what's happening in this myth, and he is contacting this gushing spring within us. And so the idea is that, this is what we're made of, really, and in the deepest well of us, there is this life force. So let love, this life force that, I was talking to someone today and we're like, 3 trillion cells in each of us, all working in harmony. There's some kind of incredible love force holding this all together, holding you all together, so just the awareness of that and the belief in that, is so, I feel, nourishing. So let love, the water of life, flow through our veins. Let a love-drunk mirror steeped in the wine of dawn translate night. And, let us see ourselves and each other with a love-drunk mirror, with a love-drunk lens. So, Margaret, you give me a poem that you've folded over. Go ahead.
Oh, a favorite?
Yeah.
So I would say that your poem, if any of you are holding the book at home on page 70, Come Out, Come Close.
Okay, yeah.
I fully believe that this poem is an ode to the interfaith work that we do.
Hmm.
I you probably saw on social media, I did a little graphic of one line from this poem. But towards the end of this, are you going to read this for us?
Yeah.
Towards the end of this, where you shatter the jugs,
Yeah.
I just feel like that is our call into this space of interfaith work that alignment is about.
Beautiful. I love that. And there's a lot of shattering of jugs. So after this, maybe we'll do another one with
That
jugs.
was great. I love
I
that.
think that the jugs are shattered 3 times in this book. Okay, so come out, come out, come close. Why hide? Why deceive? You are me and I am you. Why get mired in me's and you's? We are light upon light. And of course, this is on one dimension, right? Rumi never denies, the trials and tribulations of material existence. And yet he invites us into the other, also simultaneous reality of our oneness, simultaneous reality of the light and love that is holding us together, right? So come out, come close. So he's calling to us to that recognition. Come out, come close. Why hide? Why deceive? You are me and I am you. Why get mired in me's and you's? We are light upon light, and the glass light passes through. Why muddy ourselves with a grudge? Together we are whole and complete. Why see through eyes that split one in two? Why do the rich look down on the poor? Why does the right hand scorn the left? Both are from one body. Why call one vile and one blessed? One essence, one intelligence thrust us into this curved cosmos where the soul counts one, the mind insists on two. 5 senses, 6 directions, drop the lot, leap forth, let oneness draw you closer and draw you in. There, you are a gold mine, not a nugget of gold. There is one spirit in countless bodies, one oil in countless almonds, one meaning in countless words uttered by countless tongues. Shatter the jugs. The water is one. Steeped in union, the heart remembers a world beyond words. Soul, 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 send the news. So that invitation to us always to listen to that other simultaneous reality, that pervades Sufi mysticism and this poetry, while at the same time, in the new book, I'm working on a translation. I'll give you a little bit of the new book, but here is a moment where he's expressing frustration about material existence. He says, world of water and mud, ever since I've known you, I've known countless torments, trials, and tribulations. You are a pasture for grazing donkeys, not the abode of Jesus. Why should I be so familiar with a pasture for grazing donkeys? Why am I here? And then he goes on from there. And then he sort of has some resolving and some answer and some more questions, in the poem. But, I just want to acknowledge, how many realities we could see at once and how we can let the reality of oneness, the reality of that gushing spring, the reality of the love that holds us together, flavor our day-to-day existence, and support it and help us to relax into it. Because, at the end of the day, all of this, I think, mysticism and any kind of connection with divine is an invitation to relax. There is that.
Can
There
I
is,
can
yeah.
I say there, I'm just looking around at the people who are here. There are a lot of ministers on right now.
Mm.
And and I'd shout out to the ministers there. And I'd just ask us to pause on that line from that one you just read there for a second and see if it expands something for them to hear. There's one spirit in countless bodies.
Yeah.
And if that expands some, there's one body with many parts, but this line, there's one spirit in countless bodies, one oil in countless almonds, one meaning in countless words uttered by countless tongues. Shatter the jugs, the water is one. That's probably my favorite bit in this whole book.
Oh, good.
But just an invitation to you all to remember, please put comments in the chat and perhaps we can see them or address them as they come up. But thoughts as you're hearing Haleh talk about different things are most welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Some more shattering of jugs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just fell on upon page 65. So for 40 years, my mind drowned me in thought. Rumi talks a lot about circumspection and calculation. In one poem, he says, once I lived in a prison of circumspection and calculation. So here he says, for 40 years, my mind drowned me in thought. When love hooked me like a fish, I leapt out of my mind. See how the fruit is trapped, first by its seed, then by its husk. See how I was trapped, first by circumspection, then by calculation. Like a fig split open, my seeds would bear. Our first meal on earth begins with blood and ends with milk. Our first meal, right? So this is where from the womb to the mother's breast. Our first meal on earth begins with blood, because of course that's where we're getting our nourishment, through the blood. Our first meal on earth begins with blood and ends with milk. When my mind grew teeth, I craved more than milk. I chased my daily bread with a net, a mask, a bag of tricks. When the soul of souls caught me, nourished me, I shed my trickster's skin. Silence. No more details. I had enough of my own fever. I leapt free. So this is a poem I'm going to share now that my father would recite. It was the first poem by Rumi that I ever heard. And he says, it says, Yek khane porze mastan, mastan no residand, divan gane bandi zanjir ha daridand. And I remember hearing that, Yek khane porze mastan, mastan no residand, divan gane bandi zanjir ha daridand. And I thought, what a kind of galloping rhythm, and the poems kind of galloped across the living room. And I didn't, really catch the meanings as a child. And I didn't much care that I was Persian either as a child, but the music of it stuck in my mind. And one house, or here we go. The house overflows with love-drunk drunkards. More come knocking. Crazed but still bound, they tore off their chains. You can't quiet this ruckus. The heavens are beating the drums in celebration. Hearts that serve the heart, ecstatic souls, broke free from their prisons and launched like birds. They shattered the jugs. They don't need them. Their bodies are barrels. Their blood is wine. Oh God, what wine did they drink? Oh God, what love did they taste?
That is beautiful.
You know, and the wine is, oh, did you want to say anything?
No, you go.
The wine, you know, is metaphorical. The wine may be also literal. It is God's wine, it is love's wine, that's for sure. In one poem, he says, Jesus was drunk on God's love, his donkey was drunk on barley. So he talks about the different things that we can get drunk on. For instance, one can get drunk on power. One can get drunk on all kinds of things, right? But this is the, of course, he's hoping that we can access that love. And, you know, he's very clear that this is an intimate relationship with the unfathomable. And what do we need in a relationship with the unfathomable? But we need our imagination, because that doesn't diminish the reality of the connection. It actually allows it in a way. In one poem that I'm working on now for the second volume, I think this is the last I'll do of the second volume, but I'm just going to give, I mean, yeah, because I'm going to read from Gold more, but yeah, intimate relation with unfathomable. Yes, he says that sea, and this is, he's just talking about this boundless sea of this shoreless love, you know, that he equates sometimes with the divine, right? That sea, the image of that sea restores the light in our eyes. Those waters fall down the roof, travel through the spout, feed the garden. Our faces, the blooming flowers. Dates from that garden nourish the unborn Savior inside the Holy Mother, inside of you. Whoa.
Yeah. Whoa.
So, you know, I mean, I'll tell you now, I grew up in a secular family. Science and art was where we went, and that was fine and beautiful. And I love science and I love art, obviously. And also I had to sort of find my own sense of the unfathomable. And, you know, God is a difficult word to use for a lot of people nowadays. It's, you know, a kind of a 3-letter word worn down to a stub. I sometimes, you know, and it's a 3-letter placeholder for the unfathomable. So, okay, it's a placeholder for the unfathomable. So I use the word. And now I do, and I'm not really shy of using it, but I always feel like I have to explain myself, because there's so many people that I admire in this world who roll their eyes at that word, and I understand, but I want them to understand the way that I personally, not to know the details of the way I experience it, but I think it is wonderful and important to feel the presence of something beyond us and within us that is unnameable, unseeable, but that is coursing through us, you know. And
You have just mentioned the kind of tagline of alignment, which is we do all of this, we gather in these contemplative practices to recognize the divine that is within us, beside us, and beyond us. Beside us in these relationships that we create, but deeply within us and unfathomably beyond us. And so you are just bringing that to life for us.
I hope I bring, yeah, I hope I can transmit something of it. Yes, that's touched me. So
You see these questions here about what we were talking about before everyone else came, which is just the wonder of the process of translating.
yeah. Oh yeah, there's lots of comments here.
The
Yeah.
challenges of translation between cultures and languages.
Yeah, can you comment on the process and the challenges of translation between cultures and languages? Yeah, yeah, and I do discuss, that's true. He said you probably discussed it in the intro. Yeah, I do discuss a bit of the process in the intro of the book. And yeah, there's much I could say about translation. I mean, I feel like it's very important for a translator to really eat the poems. You know, Rumi says, eat my poems like Egyptian bread. And when I say eat the poems, I mean, you know, walk around with them, ride the train with them, wake up with them, contemplate them, let them do their work on you. And as, you know, that's what I feel I did, you know, for 6 years, specifically, most intensely, although I was hearing these poems since childhood, and then eventually singing them. And I was also reading other translations. And some of these poems I haven't seen translated. Some of them have been translated, but I felt like they needed another look. For instance, in one very famous translator's translation of a very important ghazal, he translated Herat, which means awe. And, you know, Terry Tempest Williams defines awe as the moment ego surrenders to wonder. You know, Barks translated that word as ignorance, and he called the poem Content with Ignorance. And it's not ignorance, you know, there is an aspect of bewilderment to awe, but awe, of course, is that sort of jaw drop, I can't explain this thing, but it's less about ignorance and more about a sense of deep reverence and like, oh God, I surrender to the wonder of this. You know, I'm going to read that poem because it's a very strange and interesting poem. And it's an ego death. It's one of these ego death poems. And you'll hear the turn in the middle. And, you know, ego death isn't easy. And he says, I died and was reborn countless times. And he's talking about, you know, in this lifetime. And what is ego death? You know, it's easier for some than others. It's harder for some than others. We know that there are lots of very egomaniacal people in positions of power. So it can be very hard. I mean, some of them aren't even anywhere close to thinking about ego death. But anyway, let's read this poem. How could I have known? How could I have known this longing would drive me mad? Light a roaring hellfire in my heart, make a river gush from my eyes. This is on page 29, by the way. How could I have known a flood would snatch me up and toss me like a ship in a sea of blood? How could I have known a monstrous wave would rise up, crack the hull, fling the planks in the air, and drag me down to the ocean floor? How could I have known a whale would rear its head, gulp down the sea, and leave a desert behind? How could I have known the desert's cracked seams would gape like a mouth, sucking the whale down into bottomless depths? Okay, so turn after turn. Now there's no trace of whale, desert, sea, me. How can I ask how? Every how drowned in an ocean of no how. Every what and why dissolved like salt on my lost tongue. Like every creed and school of thought, I was awestruck, struck dumb by the ocean's opium, by the beloved, flooding tangled groves of thought with light. What can I do but praise? Ocean of hidden pearls, black sea of stars, flowering fields of wide-eyed narcissus, I exhale, you expand. Shams comes from Tabriz with the key and the practice. Bitter turns sweet. We're so flushed with fire, we open like a rose. So again, there's that blooming, like in the other poem, our faces, the blooming flowers, this blooming of the human, you know, through praise, through reverence, through recognition of oneness, through the humbling. When he says, liberate yourself from the tyranny of self, be humble as soil, and you will see each particle of soil is drunk on love by the Creator's design. In winter, the garden is still drunk. The roots of trees are secretly sipping wine. And there's when the earth is just as wonderfully infused with this thing we call divine, as wherever we imagine. The trees are secretly sipping wine. He says, gardener, thunder beats a drum, clouds pour the wine. The garden is drunk, the meadow is drunk, the buds and thorns all drunk. Whirling sky, watch how the elements whirl. Water is drunk, earth is drunk, fire is drunk, air is drunk, right? So bod mas, nor mast, chor mast, ob mast. Actually, it's ob mast, bod mast, nor mast, chok mast. I don't remember the order of the elements, but it's water, fire, wind, and earth. Drunk. Mast means drunk, intoxicated with existence, intoxicated with the mysteries of non-existence. Just plain in awe, because this is so weird. This whole thing. What is this thing? We're walking around with bodies and hair and thoughts and words and language, and we understand each other. It is an absolute and complete miracle. But we get lost and caught in the mundane, which is completely understandable. And then there's the stresses of daily life, but I think that a world and a culture that is infused with reminding us of the absolute improbability of this existence and reminding us to praise and revere it every once in a while, I think that improves, everything. And I think it's useful. I think this poetry has a function, it has a function. And that's probably one of the reasons I love it so much. And someone asked me in the chat, why Rumi? Why out of all poets choose Rumi? And I think that's one of the reasons, because I feel like his poetry has he was a preacher, and he's preaching in the poetry too. He's guiding, he's helping, and he's also confessing. He's never denying, he's never acting like some kind of distant sage or some kind of distant, he's with us. He knows the struggle, he knows the challenges, he wants the alchemy of consciousness. I call the book Gold because this is about moving from, the stifled aspects of human consciousness and, greed and all these sort of, well, he'll even say sometimes the petty self, and it's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's no shame, but it's like this idea of like, I want to optimize a little bit my feeling states. So I am going to try to move from copper to gold in terms of how I feel and how I think. It improves my life. And so, this is the idea of Sufi mysticism. The central prayer, one could say, is teach me to love more deeply. Speaking of love, here's a poem. And speaking of functionality, this is a poem that a few people have told me has been useful to them in their relationships with family. And sometimes there's schisms and chasms and between family members. And so here's one. Let's love each other, my friend. Let's cherish each other before we lose each other. You'll long for me when I'm gone. You'll make a truce with me. So why put me on trial while I'm alive? Why adore the dead, but battle the living? You'll kiss the headstone of my grave. Look, I'm lying here, still as a corpse, dead as a stone. Kiss my face instead.
Do you, as you say, you walk with them, you live with these poems, do you fall in love with them before you translate them, and then do you fall in love again with the translation? Are they two Are they two separate beings, essences to you, or do they still feel one and the same after translated?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, I think. Yeah, I think definitely I'll choose to translate a specific poem because I'm in love with it. I'm in love with at least part of it, or something's happening in that it's pulling me. And I don't necessarily feel that with every poem. I mean, he has over 3,200 poems in one book, and then the 6-volume Ode to Liberation. So he's got a lot of poetry. And so, yeah, and then there'll be one that I find interesting, or one that I feel is almost medicinal for me personally, or something that I need to hear, something that I want to share, like the one that I just shared. I love the intensity of it. When he says, "Why adore the dead but battle the living?" And then he goes into that almost comic sort of invitation at the end. I love it when he plays. I love it when there's leaping imagery, or in some of the poems there is. So it's what draws me to it will be different things. What makes me fall in love with it will be, different things. But yeah, then, the work of moving it into English, that's a real process. And, I will spend a lot of time trying to, move down the body of the poem and really, carving it as if like a sculptor with a hunk of marble. And you're just moving down the body of this poem and just really trying to get it. And I only know it's done when I can recite it by heart. Meaning, and I enjoy reciting it by heart. I know it's not done when I get stuck somewhere, when I recite it and it gets a little stuck here or there. So then I have to go back and listen to it. But yeah, I'm in love with it when it rolls off of my tongue and it rolls out of me and it feels alive in me. That's when I know that it's done. And then I am generally in love with it, And I probably love some poems more than others, but
Do
yeah.
you read are you informed by other translations? Are you purposefully deviating from some that you really don't like? We were talking before about the friend cave and how that spoke to you in the second person. But are you informed by those other translations?
I mean, I certainly read them, and everybody has a different style. I mean, at some point in time, I'm going to either make a video or a series of video, or put something on my website to just allow people to look at some back to back, because there are vast differences, in terms of, I mean, many things I could give examples, but so yes, so sometimes they do inform me. Sometimes I like certain lines a lot. Sometimes if I feel that the poem is done well, I don't retranslate it, because I'm like, yeah, it's already done over there. I'm not going to read it. But then sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this needs to be translated again. So it's a mixture. It's a mixture. But you asked me actually to recite one in the email, and this was the first one that I translated. And this was an example of when I had read a translation and I thought, is that really what he said? And I didn't think so. So I went back to the original, and this is it. If wheat sprouts from my grave, and if you bake bread from it, expect to get drunk. The baker and the dough will lose their minds. The oven will rattle off ecstatic verse. If you make a pilgrimage to my grave and stand on my burial mound, expect to dance. Don't come to my grave without a drum, my friend. A feast with God is no place for sadness. Asleep in my grave, my mouth sewn shut, I chew the beloved's sweet opium. If you tear off my shroud, wear it on your chest. Open the tavern in your soul. On every side, drunkards brawl, drunkards sing, one action breeds another. God gave me life, gave me the wine of love. Death grinds me to dust, and I am still that love. I am the drunkenness born in the wine of love. Tell me, what is the wine of love but the ecstasy of loving? to the heights of the soul of Shams of Tabriz. My soul flies without delay. So,
Love that one.
yeah, I like that one. That was the first one I translated, and it's a
Oh my goodness.
it's a second it's the penultimate. I was just sorry reading a comment. I got distracted for a second. It's the penultimate poem in the book. But yeah, if wheat sprouts from my grave, and if you bake bread from it, expect to get drunk.
Yeah. Yeah, that right there. Would it be a good place to talk about the fact that Rumi does not name himself? But here at the end, we hear him shouting out to Shams, and maybe tell us a little about his relationship and what that was.
Oh, Shams and Rumi. Yeah. I mean, Rumi was around 38 years old. He was very, very famous. He had, thousands of people coming to hear him preach. He was an Islamic theologian. And Shams of Tabriz was as I say in the intro, a scruffy vagabond, wandering mystic, really living in a way that was sort of alternative lifestyle. They called him parande, which means bird. He would just move from city to city whenever he wanted. He lived very minimally. He didn't have many possessions or anything. And a lot of people, it seemed, wanted him to be their teacher, but Shams didn't really want to teach. He was kind of a loner, and he was also very disgruntled with the hypocrisy that he saw in the scholarly and religious milieu. So he was sort of a little bit of a frustrated guy. But then, he wanted to commune with somebody, and he felt that it was time to really offer what he could, as someone who did have a tremendous amount of knowledge, and also really, I think, had a heart connection to what, Sufi mysticism was about. And so he had heard of Rumi, of Molana. We call him Molana, which means our sage, our master. No one calls him Rumi really in the Middle East. Muhammad ibn Hussein Balkhi, Jalaluddin Muhammad ibn Hussein Balkhi is his name, and Molana was the sage master, also what we call him. So anyway, he knew about him because, as I said, he was famous. So then he said, I'm going to go and meet this guy. I'm going to go, and this is my friend, I think, and then he went, and they had an instant connection and an instant conversation that kind of bonded them. And then they went into a 3-month retreat together where they just talked and talked and talked. And Rumi was forever changed from that, and let me read a poem, to Shams. Well, here's an example. Okay, he says, ای در شکست جام ما، ای بر دریده دام ما، ای نور ما، ای سور ما، ای دولت منصور ما، ای یار ما، ای یار ما، دام دل خمار ما، جوشی بنه بر شور ما تا می شود انگور ما، ای نور ما، ای سور ما، ای دولت منصور ما، ای یار ما، ای یار ما، دام دل خمار ما، آتش زدی بر عود ما، نظاره کن بر دود ما. Okay, so you hear all this rhythm, and Rumi was often composing to a drum, Molana composing to a drum, so the beat is in there. And I always say this, I do recite a little bit with a Jersey accent. So if you were hearing a Persian do it, it would sound a little bit different, but I was born here in America, so I have a bit of an accent. My father would always say, never be ashamed of your accent. An accent is proof that you actually had the curiosity to learn another language.
That's great.
So my dad always said great things. I miss him and I love him, and he's the one who introduced me to Rumi. So I send hugs and kisses to my dad. And yeah, so I was talking about Shams. Oh, that poem. So let me tell you that poem in English. You shattered my cup. You shattered my cage. Light, feast, triumphant blessing, friend, trickster, haven from my drunken heart. You brought my spirit to a boil, turned my grapes to wine. You lit a fire to the fragrant wood and body of song in me. Watch the smoke rise. So he's saying to Shams, you released me, you shattered my cage. And at one point, Shams says to him, because Shams was always challenging him to go to his edge, to get freer and freer and freer. And he said, you're an idol to your followers. You're the candle in the middle of the gathering. And Rumi said, no, I'm no idol. I'm no candle. I'm the scattering of smoke. So this kind of idea that's very big in Sufi mysticism of the disappearance of the self, which then brings forth the truer self, right? So he became the most idiosyncratic version of himself, a poet, but he lost the masks, the roles, the narratives that kind of stifle and shackle us. What did Blake say? Blake called them the mind-forged manacles. So when we're free of the mind-forged manacles, he says, love opens the clenched body, lets the soul breathe. Reason. Then he says, oh, spirit is dazzled. No, actually, I can't remember the next.
Well, I think there's an answer to Abby's question in what you said there. If you see Abby's question there about wine, drunkenness, intoxication as a theme here, like you say in your intro, that here's this preacher, theologian, scholastic, who comes into relationship with this man who shows him that the way he can really find what he's preaching about, the liberation from the cramped shell of self.
That's right.
Of your wording of that, the union with a shoreless love.
Yes.
That how he can find that is through the intoxication of the practice of not sitting in practice with your theology and your scholastics, but with the music and the poetry and the wine and the whirling dance.
I mean, that's what Shams brought to him. Yes, he brought him the music, he brought him the whirling practice, this movement practice, and whatever the movement practice is, something that involves coordination, but this is a very, very interesting movement practice. I mean, our galaxy is a spiral. Not all galaxies are spirals. Some are, I think like ovals, there's different shapes. Our galaxy is a spiral. Our DNA is a spiral. The electrons are spinning around the nucleus of an atom. The sun is the Earth.
It's all.
The Earth is spinning around the sun. I mean, there's so much spinning going on. There's so much whirling going on a very, very micro and very, very macro level in our galaxy. Maybe there's different movement in other, I don't know. But the point is that this practice is whirling. And in a way, they believed that it was a deep alignment. When you have your right hand up and you're receiving spirit and your left hand pointing to the ground and you're letting it come through. And you're also pulling up the earth energy too, which is also so sacred. And you become a vessel. In order to hold this whirling motion, you actually have to deeply relax. And that's something that I learned in the practice, because at first I was like, whoa, this is so scary. What am I doing whirling? I'm going to get dizzy. And one time I actually fell, which is kind of rare, but I was so much sort of like thinking about it that I couldn't. Then one day, the alignment, the interfaith alignment came. I was tweaking and I realized, oh, this is actually a very deep relaxation. So it was when I came into the relaxed space that then I could whirl for a long time. And Rumi would whirl for hours and hours and hours. And as he was whirling, the drum was playing. There was sometimes a ney playing, and this was all Shams brought to him, you know, because among conservatives, music was considered either distraction or even a sin, you know. But Shams said, forget that. This is a portal to the divine. And when you are in a process of deep, deep listening and the mind is silent and your body is in this motion, you are connecting to something. And that's where Rumi did a lot of his poetry writing while he was whirling. So people were writing it down, you know. And the poem that I was gonna, well, I want to get to the wine one because I want to take to Abby's question, you know, and then I'll remember to do the other one. But Abby, you asked about the wine, the drunkenness, the taverns. Yeah, all metaphor or a commentary on social norms. I think it's both. It's mostly metaphor. I mean, this is the wine of love, the wine of the divine, but there also was literal wine, and wine was considered a sin. To drink wine was a sin among, you know, in the Islamic tradition. But Shams said, Rumi, Molana, my friend Muhammad ibn Hussein Balkhi, go to the Jewish neighborhood and buy wine, because they were making it there, because you weren't allowed to make it in the Islamic neighborhood, and walk home with it so everyone can see. I talk about this in the intro. Walk home with it so everyone can see. Why? Because you need to be free of your reputation, of following sort of this idea of what's prohibited and what's not prohibited. No more of that. Shams didn't believe that. He didn't think that that was the essence of Islam. You know, Shams believed very much in the religion, and also he was a mystic. So, you know, the roots of the roots of the roots of the roots of the religion, as the Masnavi, when Rumi says this book is the roots of the roots of the roots of religion. The roots of religion, this is the mystical philosophy that we all share as a universal wisdom. You know, they say the religious ones don't get along, or the religious ones fight, the mystics get along, you know. So anyway, so in this poem, we talk about more jugs, but what I do want to say about that wine and drunkenness, in one poem he says, we are drunk, but not on crushed grapes. Anything the mind guesses, we are far from that. You know, so this is the beyond mind soul energy that we're drunk on. This love energy that we're drunk on, you know. So he says, Sufis arrive from the left and right, wandering door to door, alley to alley. Where is the wine? The heart is a door, the soul an alley, and the wine flows from God's jug. The cupbearer opens it, calls out, greetings, friends. To drink this wine is not a sin. To feel ecstasy is not a sin. Feeling guilt for feeling pleasure, that's the sin, that's the chain. Shatter it, tear it off. Then invite the Puritans over. Today is an invitation to ecstasy. Let them know. If they turn away, let them go. Let them judge, let them talk. Let them smear your good name. You'll have less to guard. Lover, the eyes of lovers behold you. Your friend is the sea. So that kind of freedom, you know, Blake, again, going back to Blake for a second, the mind forged manacles. A lot of times it's the dogma and the conventions and the shaming that we experience in our lifetimes that is the shackle, you know. So to break free of those mind forged manacles, whether we forged them or somebody else did, you know, this is a direct invitation to that, you know. Let them judge, let them talk, let them smear your good name. You'll have less to guard. You know, and how else are we going to get to the honest and intimate conversation, which is what freed Maulana Rumi anyway, was honest and intimate conversation. How do we even get to that if we're so worried about you know, what this person thinks or that person thinks of what we're saying or doing.
And then,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
say the loss of Shams shattered and remade him.
That's right. The loss of Shams shattered and remade him. Yeah. So their friendship was over the course of about 2.5 years. They weren't hanging out for 10 years. It was pretty short. And the first time that Shams left, it seems that he was driven out of town by jealous disciples because they were like, hey, what happened to our guy? This scruffy vagabond, gets him all the time. What the heck? So they drove him out of town. And then Rumi was very distraught, depressed, and wanted him back. And then he heard that he was in Damascus, and he wrote 4 poems. That was supposedly the first time he wrote poems. So the first poems he wrote were to bring his friend back. And he told his son to take him and take it with a letter to him and tell him to come back. So then Shams came back, and then eventually it seems he passed away. Some people say he was murdered. I don't know. We don't know. But he was gone the second time. On the second disappearance, he was gone. And that really tore him apart. And then also then he realized, he was always united with him. And then he never says his own name at the end of a poem. So in the ghazal form, it's a tradition for the poet to say their own name. It's a kind of way of signing off the poem. So Hafez would say Hafez, or Attar would say Attar. But Rumi never said his name. He said most often Shams of Tabriz. So this friend was always with him forever. And on his deathbed, when he wrote that poem, if wheat sprouts from my grave and if you bake bread from it, expect to get drunk, the last couplet he says, to the heights of the soul of Shams of Tabriz, my soul flies without delay. It's so wonderful to love a friend so much, I mean, a guide, a mentor, a love, a friend, all of it, whatever the specific nature of the relationship is, we don't necessarily know, but what a love, I think also even of the founders of AA, that lawyer and doctor, and what state was it? I don't know, somewhere I think in the Midwest. But the two of them, they sat together and talked together. And, they said, I think they said this, or maybe this was a common expression, but they believed this too. When there's 2 people in the room having honest and intimate conversation, God is in the room, So this idea of also connecting to this divine energy through our connections as human beings.
The divine beside us.
Yeah. And between us, within us and between us, beside us. Yeah. So he says, in that, I said there was often a drum spin, playing, so you could hear some of the rhythm. Yar mara qar mara ishq jigar khar mara yar toyi qar toyi khaj nagahdar mara دان تویی دام تویی باد تویی جام تویی پخت تویی خام به مگذار مرا حجره خورشید تویی خانه ناهید تویی روزه امید تویی راه ده یار مرا روز تویی حاصل دریوز تویی آب تویی کوز تویی آب دهیم بار مرا. And actually, the ghazal form has that couplet, refrain. The refrain comes back, so you're moving in this circle, and it's mara. So it's like حجره خورشید توی خانه ناهید توی روزه امید توی راه ده یار مرا روز توی حاصل دریوز توی آب توی کوز توی آب دهیم بار مرا. So now, do you have to let go of the music of the original language as a translator? I say,
Just
you
breath.
gotta be willing. What's that? It's breathtaking. Yeah, it's breathtaking. I say, as a translator, you gotta be willing to let go of the music of the original language
Yeah.
and make music in the new language, because languages are different and languages have different music. And one could sit and really try to get all those rhymes, but I tell you, you have to compromise the image and the meaning to get the rhyme. And I don't think it's worth it, because who wants, I mean, I don't want I don't want a nursery rhyme anyway. I like the freedom of contemporary American poetry. So I am one who reads contemporary American poetry. And so I try to do it in the music of contemporary American poetry. I'm saying this like, I feel like I'm just like, I know it's tough. No, it's tough because you have to let go of something that's so beautiful, but then you just, and as Wisława Szymborska, the wonderful Polish poet says, she says, that rare miracle when the translation becomes a second original, and you have to be willing to allow it to be something new, because it is in the new language. And there's, an essay by Dick Davies, who translates Persian, and he says, what is considered poetry in one linguistic community is different than what is considered poetry in another linguistic community. That too is true. So sometimes what sounds like poetry to us, to American contemporary ear, sometimes Persians hear, they're like, I don't see how that's poetry, because it's so different than what defines poetry in Persian. So like they read Robert Bly, or they read Adrian Rich, or they read Allen Ginsberg. They're like, that's poetry. Not all of them, but that happens sometimes, So anyway, friend.
I feel as if there are some questions that maybe we
Yeah.
can get to, but Dave, this last one is asking the word for within and among. Does the one word mean both things? Can you pinpoint that word?
Oh, the reign of heaven is within among you. Among, that's such an interesting word, among.
Well, a minute ago, you used both words in the same sentence, and I thought perhaps there might be some parallel.
Yeah, no, they're different. They're different words. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Your translations are so bold and like nothing I have ever heard of Rumi before, Maulana. So boldly beautiful and filled with your voice and your music in them too. And really excited that you're going to come back in October
Oh,
and give us a half-hour session of our evening contemplative practices on Sunday that we do, where you will be chanting, singing. Is the music your own?
yeah.
Create? Do
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I like to compose to the, yeah. It's commonly done. Iranian vocalists will sing Rumi because, again, he was often composing while the rhythm, so it's like lends itself to song.
Well, you've already just in reciting, we hear the music in it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, exactly.
you could leave us with the last one in this book, which is
Oh, sure.
beautiful, beautiful way to end. And everybody take this one in, drink this one in.
I am blasphemous and religious. The wine and its dregs. An old sage, a young man, a child. When I leave this world, don't say I died. Say I was dead, then came to life. Say the beloved whisked me away.
Yeah, that. Beautiful. so incredibly grateful for you sharing this with us that we can hold and read, but especially this time with us.
Thank you. Yeah, it really, truly, I appreciate the invitation, and it's really, really my pleasure to share it. You're so welcome, and I thank you for creating this platform that I know, as we were talking before, was an oasis for people during the pandemic, and still continues to be a place where people can come and take their ladle and drink down some, divine spirit, that's
Shatter
good.
the jugs, right?
What
Shatter
are the drugs and
the
yeah,
water all is one.
yeah. So, yeah, thank you all. And, the book, if you want to get it, it's around, it's online. So,
We can't wait for the next one. When's the
yeah.
next one coming?
Well, it takes a while.
I'm sure it does.
Coming. I mean, I'm in it. I don't know the exact date yet.
Okay.
Coming soon.
We will continue to do this with our books so that they
Yeah.
can enjoy.
Thank
Cannot
you so much, Margaret. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your vibe. Your energy is so lovely.
thank you, Haleh. And thank you everybody for being here.
Yeah, thank you everybody for being here and for your comments too, because I read some of them in different moments and I really appreciated them. And also thank you for the questions too. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you all.